you know.
Speaking of you feeling comfortable,
Okay.
when did you first start cross-dressing?
With the start.
Ever since I can remember.
So Rex, tell me, what is it you do for a living?
Well, it's a pretty complicated answer, Vinny. I got to be honest with you. When I got out of college, I really didn't know what the heck I wanted to do, and my father owned a construction company when I was growing up, and it was sort of a natural progression because I went to school for science. I loved to be outside in nature, and I already knew how to use power tools. So it just was the perfect job for me, which was building exhibits, because you needed some scientific knowledge and you needed to know how to build things. And I always liked to draw, so I have a little bit of a artistic talent. But I just always wanted to do whatever it is I wanted to do in life, and this was really the best way to do it. I love to travel. I love to create images with video and still photography, and I like to build things. So it's perfect.
If I said, what's your job description? How would you say? My job description is?
Officially, my job title is Exhibits Designer Fabricator, which basically means that someone comes to me from a zoo and says, we want to house this particular type of monkey, and they live in Africa. So it's my job to figure out what type of trees that monkey likes to swing from, whether he likes to land on horizontal surfaces or he likes to swing from vertical surfaces, and what type of rocks are at the bottom of that tree, and what kind of dirt is around the rocks at the bottom of the tree. And I try to teach people through sort of experiencing the exhibit about a little bit more about what that monkey or that particular animal, how they live, what they eat, and how they spend their day.
How many other people do what you do?
There are really just a handful of companies. I mean, and they span the range from, an organization that has a big building and has secretaries, all the way down to sort of what I do, which is almost a one-man show. I have a studio in my backyard. I have my office in my backyard. And when I'm not on the road, my work commute is literally about 10 feet, which is exactly the way I like it. And then when I have a job that I have to go to and install the exhibits, I very often have to go on the road for months at a time. So I'll drive usually the exhibits that I've pre-built in my studio at home out to a particular facility and then spend as much time as I need installing them.
So if I'm a museum director and I was like, you know what, we're going to get in this XYZ animal, we need to create an exhibit for it, who should I call? How would I find you?
It's mostly through word of mouth, to be honest with you. I don't even have a website, if you can believe it. And I always said I would get a website when I needed one. I'm generally as busy as I want to be. It's a very small world. There are fewer than a couple of hundred zoological parks, and by that I mean an aquarium or a zoo in the whole country. And all of those directors and zoo workers all know each other. They all hang around in the same places. So it's generally the first place they go is someone else that they know in the industry, and that they heard at the last meeting that, they built a rainforest exhibit. I wonder who they got to build the exhibit for them. I mean, the deck is very often stacked in my favor. They call me, and I know that I have the job because they say, we want you to do it. And then often it's just sort of to go through the formality of the bidding process.
Can I get you to say a line about maybe your calling card are your exhibits themselves? Like that's another way. Word of mouth is one thing, but when people see your exhibit, you want them to say,
right,
who did that? I want that same person who did that great project right there.
I gotcha.
So I'll set you up. So are past projects your calling card?
They absolutely are. People in this business, you can ask my wife, anytime we go anywhere, we have to go to every zoo and every aquarium in the place that we're at when we're on vacation. And I assume that everyone else in this business probably does the same type of thing. So they're always out there shopping. So if they see a particular exhibit that they like, they can just go to the director of that facility and say, hey, who built that exhibit? So yeah, absolutely. I mean, I take a lot of pride in the fact that my exhibits look very realistic, and also they are easy to use for the staff of the zoo, and they also are friendly to the animals.
Can I make a quick comment?
Sure.
I was asking you a question like, are past projects your calling card?
Yeah.
And you were to say like, my past projects are my calling card,
Okay.
and start answering.
Want me to start again?
It's up to you.
Yeah.
Sometimes if it feels natural, it does. If not,
Right.
it can. Sometimes it can sound artificial. So it's up to you.
Okay.
I just lost. Oh, one of the things we didn't talk about in there was I think it was a project you were making with the tree. It was a time lapse. Can you tell me what was that project?
Sure. I was building an exhibit at the Fort Worth Zoo in a whole new building called the Museum of Living Art, and it was a brand new reptile house. And I was hired to build a series of exhibits in sort of this larger improvement that the zoo was doing. And one of the exhibits that I had to do was to build a real intricate Buttress tree, and a buttress is basically the bottom of the tree as it flares out. Trees generally buttress when there's lots of water around. So obviously in a rainforest there's lots of water around, so you end up with a lot of buttress trees. They're very interesting to look at, so a lot of zoos like to have them, but they're also a lot of work. So I figured that this was a perfect opportunity for me to set up a time-lapse video, because the tree was going to take somewhere between 2 and 3 weeks to build, and it really went from an empty room to basically filling the entire floor area with just the interlocking roots of this giant tree. So it was kind of the perfect thing to do if I wanted to get a time lapse done.
One of the things I noticed in that video was the level of detail you concern yourself with. For instance, the bark on the tree.
I think that a lot of people today are a lot more sophisticated than they even know that they are in terms of to see how realistic something looks. So it's imperative to get as many of those little tiny details as you possibly can, because people will walk up to an exhibit and they don't even know why they think that it looks fake, but they just know that it looks fake. So I really try my hardest, and by trying my hardest, I mean I get on airplanes, fly halfway around the world, and sweat my friggin' ass off in rainforests for weeks at a time, molding scars on trees, the bottom of termite trails, mushrooms, anything that I possibly can to throw in those little tiny details in the exhibit, because people really appreciate it. And I don't just mean the people who pay the bill that I give them at the end of the job. It's all those little things that kind of add up to making people feel like they're being immersed in that exhibit. And if they don't have the opportunity to get on that airplane and fly halfway around the world and put themselves in the middle of that environment, it's my job to try to make them feel as much as they can as though they were really visiting that area.
I think immersed is a good word. I mean, some of these other shows that I see on TV, whether it's the fish tank show or whatever, it seems, how are you, what shows out there like this tank show, how do you feel about them? And how would your show be different?
Well, I've never put a keg in the middle of one of my exhibits, I'll put it that way. I at a certain time wish that there was a keg in the middle of the exhibit, but they're a little bit more Vegas than I am. I'm dirt and grime. I try to make things look as though they've been there for tens of thousands of years, as opposed to something that looks like it's brand new and shiny. And that's a lot why I don't work in hotels and sort of thing. They don't want the type of exhibits that I generally build because they look like they're dirty and they look like they're grimy and they have water stains on them. I spend days making things look like they have water stains on them, as opposed to in a hotel or something where they want to scrub something like that off. So kind of the difference, I think, from what I do, and we work in the same type of medium, in that we very often both get a big empty box that holds water, but I'm much more concerned with realism and teaching lessons of conservation and biology, more so than entertainment.
I think for a show we do with you, it'd probably be something where we take it from you getting the call, but we wouldn't necessarily be able to go to completion because these things take time. So I would see it as you getting the call, how am I going to deal with this? Meanwhile, while you're trying to figure out job A, you still have job B going. I need to cut to job B and see how that's going. Can you tell me a little bit about how you juggle different jobs?
Sure. At any given time, I'm probably working on 3 or 4 different projects in my studio, because it really is. I have a lot of overlap in that while I'm mixing up some epoxy, I can be doing the primary job that I'm working on, but in the back of my head, I know that I have this other project coming up. And I hate throwing anything away, so I could be constantly accumulating. Let's say I'm pouring corals for a coral reef currently, but I know that I have a rainforest coming up in a couple of months, so maybe I'll mix up a little extra batch of material and be pouring mushrooms, for the rainforest down the road. I have some jobs that only take a couple of days, and then there are other jobs that I'm on location for months at a time. I'm trying to get a little bit better about having people who I work with, giving them a little bit more responsibility, but I'm a freaking control freak, and I don't like to relinquish control. I have a picture in my head about how I want something to look, and I get a little mad sometimes when I let someone alone for 4 hours and it doesn't come out exactly the way I wanted it to. My nephew, who works for me a lot, calls me Gordon Ramsay, and it doesn't come out other than when I'm at work. It's the strangest thing, because it just seems so obvious to me that is the way that it's supposed to be, and why didn't it turn out that way? And I don't know, maybe you can yell at your family a little bit more than you can anybody else. They can't tell you to go fuck yourself quite as easily.
Well, not my wife.
Oh, I'm talking about my wife. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So when you get a job, what's the process from the person? Because they're trying to describe something that doesn't exist. And when you come back and you say, okay, you explain to me the problem, here's the solution I'm going to offer you. What's that process? Are there any examples? Are there any prices? Did anyone have sticker shock? Did anyone say, that's too big? Or anyone say, oh, that's great, I didn't think about it this way?
I generally get a lot of latitude when it comes to the work, because, again, there aren't a lot of people out there who do what I do. And it's sort of my job to make sure that it comes out the way I know how it's supposed to look more than they know how it's supposed to look, generally. People who are in the sciences or who are managers generally have a bit of an issue translating an imagination. They have a hard time imagining things the way it's supposed to look. It's one of the main reasons why I try to build a scale model of practically everything that I do, because they know that they want a rainforest, and they know that they want their keepers to be able to get in and out of the exhibit, and they know that they don't want to be able to see certain things. But sometimes I've had a designer ask me if I could have water roll uphill before. So it's a perfect example of how they don't really translate what they think that they want into the real world. So I really occupy a space between architects and designers and zookeepers and then, who are responsible for the health of the animals, and then the management staff. And I am sitting squarely in the middle. Oh, and then there's the educators, which are the biggest pain in the ass of all of them. I sit squarely in the middle of all those people, and I have to try to keep all of them happy. And it's a nightmare sometimes because everybody wants something different. And I try to explain to my clients that there are three components to every job. There's time, there's money, and there's quality. They get to choose two of those things, but I get to choose the third one because you can't have something done quickly and well for cheap. You just can't. It's impossible. So that I try to explain that to people the best that I can. I build them a physical scale model of hopefully exactly what they're going to get, and then that I have the unique benefit of everyone wanting to love what I do. I go into every meeting with people, their expectations being that they are going to be able to brag about this exhibit forever, which is a really nice position to start at because they want to love it. You really have to fuck up for someone to make that transition from I want to tell everyone how much I love this to oh my god, this sucks. And I will bend over backwards every time to make sure that no one ever thinks that it sucks. I will take money out of my own pocket. I'll take time out of my own schedule to fly across the country if something breaks. And that is why I don't need a website. And that's why I don't need to advertise, because I make sure everybody's happy at the end of the job. I can call any one of my ex-girlfriends. I'm a pleaser. I don't burn bridges. I just don't do it.
Well, you said bend over backwards. If this takes off in TV, you'll learn how to bend over front. Tell me a little bit about the alligator that we were looking at inside. How did you, what were your initial thoughts when you were, tell me about what that job was for and what your initial thoughts were about the proximity of the gators to the kids.
Okay. The project that I was working on was called Crocodilians of the World. And I was charged with getting photo and video of every species of crocodilian on Earth without having to fly all over the fucking place to do it. So I have an amazing network of people that I know, both within the zoo world and outside the zoo world, that I can call to help me complete a job. And this particular guy that I know works at the Disney Wild Animal Park, and his job is to deal with the African crocodiles. So this guy is not afraid of anything. And I hired him to help me get footage of American alligators and to help me try to track down crocodilians that I could go take pictures of in as few places as possible. So my buddy Lonnie is one of those guys that I'm on the boat and I'll say, go get that one. And he'll dive off the front of the boat with just a mask on his face and his underwear practically, and come back with an 8-foot alligator in his hand like this and saying, okay, now what do you want me to do with it? So Lonnie took me around Florida and we went all around different springs, and I was a little reluctant. I had never really worked with alligators before. My dive gear starts to melt when it goes in fresh water. I'm really an ocean guy. I'll kiss a great white on the